Welcome to the Newsmakers Podcast. I'm Billy Hollowell, and this is a show where we go behind the headlines every day to bring you an interview with a pastor, entertainer, politician, or other notable news figure. And this is a show, again, it's daily, but it's based on our weekly TV show, which is also called Newsmakers. You can watch it on the CBN News channel and also on our YouTube page. And on this show, every day, we dive deep. It's a little more longer form with one of the people who you will often see on our Newsmakers show or across the CBN News platforms. On today's Newsmakers, we're joined by actor Eric Close, who joins us to talk about portraying Joe Kennedy, the football coach who fought a battle all the way to the Supreme Court to pray on the 50-yard line in the new film, Average Joe. He'll get into that role, why it matters, and how Joe Kennedy's story has inspired him. With no further ado, here is Eric Close. Eric, you've got a new film coming out October 11th, Average Joe. It's a great story, and we're going to dive into the ins and the outs of it. But what was it for you that drew you to this film?
Well, first of all, what drew me to this project was the story. It was the fact that it was based on a true story, but based on Joe's book, his journey, and Denise as well. And I love redemption stories. I love second chance stories, and knowing what Joe and Denise went through as kids and all the challenges they faced and the obstacles life threw at them, and some of them by their own doing, some of the choices they made, how that affected their life and how they survived it and they hung in there and didn't give up, and then ultimately finding faith and the value of that in their life and how that turned things around for them. I just love that story. And just seeing someone get a chance in life to right the ship.
Yeah. Well, and, Joe Kennedy, for those who don't know, he's the guy who prayed on the 50-yard line on the football field, and it became a major story, obviously, that he was praying there on the 50-yard line because it developed into a legal battle that went to the Supreme Court. And really, actually, one of the biggest religious liberty wins at the Supreme Court that we've seen in American history. Really a victory that protects everybody's rights in this country. But the story that leads there, a lot of people don't really know that backstory that you were just describing. And one thing, I mean, you would know better than I would as an actor, but when you're portraying a real person, right, who is a well-known person in the midst of a situation like that, what goes into it? How is it different than maybe, preparing for a role of a made-up character?
Well, at the end of the day, I'm still bringing my interpretation of that role to it, but trying to draw, first of all, reading Joe's book prior to the movie, understanding his life, trying to relate to these different aspects, that and the challenge he's been facing, try to just kind of immerse myself into that world. Um, and getting a chance to meet him. One of the things that was funny is he has kind of a goatee little beard right here, and I thought was super cool. So I showed up on set with the same kind of facial hair as Joe, and I actually left my hair a little longer because I was going to cut it short like his. Is kind of that military cut. And the producers were like, "Okay, look, no, we want you to be clean shaven, and too much. It's gonna be too complicated because the movie goes over a long period of time, and sometimes he has a beard, sometimes he doesn't, and so but little things like that. But I love his sense of humor. He's self-deprecating. He doesn't take himself too serious. He's just such a kind, likable guy. And I didn't get to spend a ton of time around Joe, but I got to, have lunch with he and Denise a couple of times and pick their brains about certain things that was going on during this journey. And, there were some pretty painful scenes in the movie that we were shooting too, that I think they chose to avoid being on set during those days because it brings up a lot of difficult things that they went through, especially in their childhood.
Yeah, and that backstory we won't get into too much here because I want people to see the film and see that. But I think When you look at a story like this, the public gets this little snippet of it. They get the legal battle portion of it. They get those headlines that come out. For you, looking at the story, going through the book, preparing to play him, what stuck out most to you about his character, who he is as a person, especially in light of the perseverance it takes to go for a decade through this legal battle?
Well, the word you just used is perseverance. I love that about this character. He persevered through a lot of adversity, um, and I admired his conviction. The willingness to fight for his convictions and what he felt was right, regardless of the negative fallout that would come his way, the threats, the you know the loss of work, whatever, his livelihood. And a lot of times, we face those obstacles in life when no you doing the right thing um, poses some challenges and some risks. But in the end, you just realize um, it's important to do the right thing as often as you can, and sometimes we don't. And that's one of the challenges in life. But I just admired that about Joe, and also he's a fighter. I mean, he's been fighting since he was a kid, and in different aspects. And then he went into the military and just fighting for his life, fighting for our country and our freedoms here, and then also fighting for his marriage, wanting for his marriage to survive, because he talks about that it didn't work out for him the first time. So wanting to be successful in that, and and then just his willingness to fight for all Americans, not just himself or a certain group.
Yeah. As I covered his story over the years, because I remember when it was happening at Bremerton, where he was, praying on the 50-yard line and the controversy first started before it was ever even really a legal battle. And I remember watching that journey. And this is the case a lot of times when you have a person who, like you were saying, they step up to the plate and they enter into a public facing sort of circumstance that maybe they wouldn't have wanted, but they find themselves there. So many things that are said about those people, things from their past that are dredged up, things that are not really accurately portrayed. And it's such a burden, I don't think people realize, regardless of what that circumstance is, that leads to that forward facing situation for people like that. And he went through a lot of that in his journey, of people saying things about his past. And you really had a chance to dive into that past. And you just spoke about that quite a bit. When you finished the film, what sort of values, maybe that we haven't talked about, things that we haven't discussed here, did you walk away with in terms of just your appreciation, maybe, of the human experience in general in light of his childhood, for instance?
Well, that's one of the aspects, like as I mentioned earlier, that I loved about this film is that um, you know every person matters, everybody matters, and and you just don't know. And God loves, his love is so far and wide, it reaches to everybody, and it's there just for people to say, hey, I'm here, I need that in my life. And people go through really difficult times, and it's like we'll say to our friends sometimes, or people will say to us, hey, just hang in there, things are going to be okay, things are going to get better. And just the fortitude and the perseverance that Joe has, and his willingness to not let the circumstances of his life dictate his future in a negative way. He's like, I'm going to fight to rise above what I've been through, and not let that define who I am going forward. It's the person who says alcoholism is a issue in their family, and they say, I'm going to change that legacy, and I'm going to go down a different path. Or there's abuse maybe, and they're like, that stops here with me, and I'm going, whatever that conviction is, that battle. And Joe, I think, just is a great reminder. He says that through faith nothing is impossible, and you can overcome these challenges, and God can use you. And the name is Average Joe, but we're all, if you want to really look at it, we're all in the same boat. We're all average in a certain sense, but you never know when that moment might happen, when we're called to step up and stand for something and make a difference. And you look at like teachers in the classroom and how what an impact they can have on a child's life. And they grow up and they look back and someone says, "Man, you're so successful today. Who's the credit to?" Most people say, "Hey, my mom and dad," or whatever, and they go, "It was Mr. Smith and or Mrs. Jones in third grade who
Yeah.
just poured into me and believed in me, and they saw that I was struggling and they were right there for me and just paid that forward." And so you never know when we're going to have an opportunity in our life, either whether it's a big on the big stage or something in a smaller venue like a classroom, where you can be like Joe and just stand up for something, stand up for injustice, equality, those kind of things in life where people aren't being treated right, or someone just needs an encouraging word. You just never know with how you treat someone, how that's going to make a difference in the world and in someone's life. You ever heard that saying? They say you may not be able to change the world, but you can change someone's world.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think a lot of times people are so focused on a 30,000-foot view change, but it's those individual changes that do eventually change the collective, right? If you want to make an impact, you got to change individual people's hearts to get there. It's not this, very simple thing to do from that 30,000-foot level. So his story, though, I think is an example of one person not giving up. And so many times we give up too soon. And I love what you said about teachers there too. I think that's so true. We don't think often about the positions that we're in, wherever it is in life, the impact that we can have. And so, speaking of that, just as a final question for you on this film, Average Joe. Once people go and they see it and they finish watching it, what are you hoping they walk away with?
Well, back to Joe, I would say that he learned from a series of chapters in his life. He just didn't suddenly just get to this position where suddenly he was called to this momentous historic time in his life. He had to get there through lots of different battles and fights in his life that gave him that strength and that fortitude. And ultimately, really, I think the catalyst that took him over the edge and really allowed him to step out there and risk it all for something he firmly believed in, was his faith and trusting that no matter what, God had his back. And he was willing to risk it
Mm.
all for that. And I just think that one, I want people to be entertained. I want people to walk out of that movie going, "Man, I just feel uplifted. I feel encouraged." Um, and that, like I said, everybody's important. Everybody deserves a chance, and we all have our challenges in our life. We all have crises of faith in our life at times. And just, I hope the movie's an encouragement to people to hang in there and to fight for what they believe is right, and that's a great message in this story. And I find this movie to be really encouraging. Um, and that's what I put. And what's also great is that you can go with your family, you can go with your friends to see this film. And that's how movies end up being successful, is because people go to the theater and they sit in those seats, and every single person has an investment in how well a movie does. They really do. Every person out there who goes and says, "Oh, I'm going to go on Friday night or Saturday with my friends and family and see the movie," they played a part in when you hear about movies being successful. It's because of them. You can make a great movie if nobody sees it. It's just not going to do anything. So I just think that people will be pleasantly surprised by this story. And I encourage people, don't just focus on the the journey of Joe going to the Supreme Court, because that's an aspect of the story. But as a whole, it's a story about an incredible journey that this guy and his wife made in their life, and all the challenges they faced, but they never gave up. And I love that. And
I
they
love
and
it.
then their faith gave them the strength to hang in there and persevere.
I love that. And all of those events in their lives preparing them for that thing that happened, right? Everybody's focused on that thing, but it's the story of how you get there
Yeah,
that really, I think, is the most captivating here. And it's Average Joe, comes out October 11th. Appreciate your time today.
you bet. So good to see you again.
That's all for today's Newsmakers podcast. Be sure to tune in for the next episode of the show, and also head over to the CBN News YouTube channel and the CBN News channel to watch Newsmakers every week. We'll see you soon.